When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a dentist. I had shared this with my family dentist, and he was very against this idea. He sat me down and he told me, you definitely should not become a dentist. What I would encourage you to do is to go to art school. The 2008 recession hit and the school lost a lot of its funding. The industrial design program got a cut. I was working at the Apple store. It was an operational job. I loved that job so much. I joined Square on the recommendation of someone who I had worked at the Apple store with. No, I don't have a degree, but I can run a program like you've never seen, and I can lead a team that does incredible things. You do not have to do it right away. You can take a gap year. You can work a little bit and then go to school. If you can create a space for people and put them in it, good things will happen.
How does a recession, a retail job, and a dentist advice lead one woman to a thriving DesignOps career? Michelle Morrison's story is all about unexpected paths. From almost becoming a dentist to running DesignOps at companies like Square, Twitter, and now Google, Michelle's journey shows us how life's twists can lead to the most exciting destinations. I'm your host, Chris Abad, and this is Pixelated Path. In today's episode, Michelle shares how she built her career, what she learned navigating hypergrowth startups, and how she's shaping the future of DesignOps working on AI at Google. If you're curious about forging a non-traditional career in tech, or you just want to hear what it's like to lead through constant change, this episode's for you. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to Pixelated Path so you never miss an episode packed with inspiring stories and career insights. Let's jump in. You've had a pretty long career at this point in DesignOps, but you actually went to school for industrial design. So where did your interest in design first start?
It's a kind of funny story related to my first job. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a dentist. I thought it was a clear career path. I don't know, it seemed like a good idea. And I had shared this with my family dentist, and he was very against this idea. And so he'd invited me to come work in the dentist office and do, ironically, little operational tasks like file the paperwork and take out the trash and develop the x-rays and the stuff that I could do back of house. And I had worked for him for a couple months, and he sat me down and he told me, he's like, look, this is as fun as it's ever going to get. You're 15 years old and you definitely should not become a dentist. What I would encourage you to do is to go to art school, design school. Do not go to dentistry school. And he put me on this path that I didn't even consider for myself that ended up being my life's work and really fulfilling career. So thank you, Dr. Bayette, for that redirect. Otherwise, I would have been filling cavities for the rest of my life.
Really? That's so interesting that after a couple months, he's like, this is not for you. You should go to art school. Do you think there was something that he saw in you, your interests, the way that you worked, that said to him, art, not dentistry?
I think I have had like a known creative presence from a young age. Like you look at my school notes, there are doodles all over them. I had painted some paintings for the waiting room in the dentist's office, and part of it was seeing that creative interest, but I think also it was him seeing his own fulfillment and maybe even wanting that for himself. Like, I think it was really like a steer that was focused on like humanity and kind of richness of life rather than, really knowing that I would go into design. So anyway, it's a very transformational job as a first job. And it felt really good to have someone see that potential and kind of point me in that direction. My family is blue collar workers. We work construction. I have family in the military. So design was really never something that I had role models in. And it was honestly this one person who kind of prompted me to think about it early enough that I felt very confident in it by the time I went to college.
Talk about life lessons coming from the most unexpected of places. That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm very grateful for that.
So as you went to school, what was it about the field of industrial design that drew you?
Anyone who knows me in my personal life knows that I love stuff. I like little trinkets. I like making things. My home is nowhere near the like design minimalist aesthetic that many designers embrace. And the desire to go into industrial design came from the need and want to make things. My dad is in construction, and so I watched him make things with raw materials my whole life. And so I knew that you could apply that to plastic goods, metal goods. Maybe I wanted to make a car one day. At that point of being 18 and going to college, I kind of told myself I wanted to make beautiful pet products because I'm an animal lover and always thought the offering was a little ugly. So I think like as someone who just loves the physical goods, it made sense to do industrial design over graphic design or otherwise.
So you go to school for industrial design, and then what happened?
You know, the world is a funny place and the tides change. I was in school. I went to San Francisco State University, which is a really cool school. It's a public commuter school, so there's a lot of folks there who are there for business, there for other things, but it's well funded from a creative standpoint because of the Coppola investments in the school. So I was having a great time. This was like a wonderful city to be in. I was growing and learning in really cool ways. But the 2008 recession hit and the school lost a lot of its funding. It had a lot of money tied up. Its trust was tied up in real estate, and the school went bankrupt. And so, which I didn't even know was possible. Like I didn't know anything about endowments or how like universities worked as an institution. And so the industrial design program got cut. And it was a weird time to be young and wanting a career. I already had a job that I was proud to work and had a pretty decent income from. And so I doubled down on work. I was working at the Apple store in the marina in San Francisco, and I ran the back of house, and it was an operational job, which is a big theme for me. I loved that job so much, and I felt like safety and security was available to me in that job. And so I didn't finish school, and I went all in on this job that ended up being like another big like transformational moment in my life, because it was that job that later opened a door to tech for me. It gave me kind of the business foundations that I still lean on today. So didn't finish school, loved that operational job in retail environment. It was like tech adjacent where I could still like go to the Apple campus and see like, you know, the real hotshots doing their thing. Maybe consider going into industrial design there one day, given the economy, the place I was in, like all of these conditions. Like that's what I did instead of finishing my degree.
I mean, as someone studying industrial design, especially around that time, it makes a ton of sense that Apple's like one of the ideal places that you would want to do that type of work. Did you mentioned like you'd go to the campus, you'd be able to see people work. Like what other things did you do to just expose yourself beyond the retail side of the business?
One of the things that I really am inspired by with the way that Apple treats their retail employees is that they stoke, like, how would I say this? They stoke the operational. And so you can start a job in a retail environment and you can take corporate learning and development classes, and you're afforded all of these. There's like internships and apprenticeships and mentorship programs and stuff that you would never get working at Sephora. Like, let's be real. And they kind of like help people see themselves like on that path. And there are many people who I worked with, I don't even want to say the number, but 20 years ago in the retail store, who work for Apple corporate now. And they are writers, they are production engineers, they are the producers, like people who 20 years old I was working with in this environment, like took that path and took that track and eventually got those big jobs in corporate and are very loyal to the company because the company is like given them a long trajectory of not just making and contributing to something meaningful, but also growing as you do it. So they do have some diehards, and I think it's cool that they really pull people out of retail into corporate.
Was there like a particular course you took or program that you went through with Apple, like outside of retail, that you feel like turned you towards that industry, or was it just generally being in that environment and kind of being surrounded by it?
They do a ton of team building, individual development. There's a lot of material that help you build kind of the baseline foundation of being a professional. So it was very much in the like day-to-day experience of working there. But I remember this time where I'd taken a group of, my job was inventory control. And so I had a group of other inventory control specialists from around the Bay Area who I brought together. And we did a 2-part like program where we got coverage and we were allowed to go as part of just our jobs. We went down to Cupertino and we took a class on communication. And it was really cool because it was about team dynamics, leadership, effectiveness, style. We were so young and we were learning with and from these pros, these super seasoned pros at Apple. So we all got a lot out of that. And the second half of that little tour was that we went up to Elk Grove where one of the big inventory warehouses were. And the people at corporate who we dealt with the most, who we like filed our loss assessments with, who we ordered things from, who just helped us with overall supply chain and distribution. Those folks met us in the warehouse and they really showed us the like nuts and bolts of how supply chain management worked in its physical form. And that to me was one of the first like big eye-opening like systems designs moments where I knew my part in the puzzle. And because I learned their part in the puzzle and some of the other aspects of it, I became way more effective. I thought a lot more about the ecosystem of the store, not just my department in the store. And I really think that was like, because there was a bigger order of thinking, it created like an appetite for learning in the corporate environment for myself and for others, because it was like networking and mentorship and technical knowledge and all of these things that felt like we were being invested in as contributors.
Wow, that's amazing. Later on, you joined Square, and you were there when there were like 100 people, and you moved into like more of a general operations role. Can you talk a little bit about what that time was like, kind of pretty early at a company that was going through rapid growth, and then how did that turn into an ops role focused on design?
Good question. So Square was a life-changing job for me. I keep saying this, but I promise you that at these different phases, I was growing in a meaningful way. And then even now in my position, I look back at those moments and I'm so glad that I had these opportunities. The industry, so this is like circa 2011, and that was a very cool time in software making. Like it was kind of when big data is coming onto the scene. The web is a little more mature at this place. Design is like starting to take like a more prominent and important role in how products are developed. And so I joined Square on the recommendation of someone who I had worked at the Apple Store with. He was one of their first, his name is Aaron Diaz-Malim. I love him forever, and I'm so grateful for his friendship and making this recommendation to me. But I joined as a general biz ops, and that's because I had retail experience, I had retail operations experience, and I could come in and help solve kind of the general problems that exist in a very early stage startup. I was addicted to it. I felt like I was a part of something really meaningful. I was working right next to InfoSec engineers, payment specialists, risk analysts, these functions that I didn't even know existed. And I was so hungry for learning that I took it all in, worked as hard as I could because I felt like I, again, was like really a part of something meaningful. And that set me up for a path of like really extensive operations experience. I worked under or in the reporting line of Keith Boy, who is a known expert operations. He was our COO at the time. And just observing someone like that operate in that space, like really helped me think differently at a different scale about solving problems in a business. So I was in general operations for about a year, and Square had hired their first VP of people. Her name was Jude. She's incredibly talented. And she came in and she took a lay of the land, interviewed all the different people managers and their departments and got to know folks as she was ramping up. And she invited me to consider a role under her as her chief of staff. And so I would be responsible for learning programs, cultural programs, and really the nitty gritty of running an executive suite. It was the opportunity that really taught me like how to build and scale a business. And the deal was that if I worked for her for 1 year and I did a good job, she would let me have whatever job I wanted in the company. And she totally lived up to that. I worked with her for a year. I learned so much about big picture strategy, growing an organization, scaling operations, managing stakeholders, dealing with a board of directors. Like, I really got exposed to things that were so far above my pay grade that I got to observe and learn through observing. So at the end of the 1 year, I begged to join the design team because that is my true passion and my foundation. And she was good on her word. She helped me carve a path to getting into design and eventually became like one of the first producers and design operations leads Square, and got to build a function from there, got to develop go-to-market practices, connect both product development to the brand, and really we were growing both a brand and a business. So while I joined at 100 people, I left when the company was about 4,000 people and had gone from there Series C to going public. So it was a real sort of full life cycle in building products and building a business. And it set me up for what has become a really prosperous DesignOps career.
Wow. Going through that phase of a company's growth, it's like it can be so much chaos. And you're in a role where you're trying to make sense of that and organize that. You're trying to organize the chaos. And I know it's not all smooth. What was like one of the most difficult like curveballs that you were thrown that you had to work through?
It was an environment where there were some really young, really talented people there, and many of us were doing it for the first time. And so the culture was a culture of transparency, and one where if a decision was made, you would communicate it out broadly, its considerations, its implications, what you learned from that decision, and it was for the benefit of the collective. It was a very high trusting culture, so there were really low risk of leaks at the time. And so generally, people would share both their successes and their learnings. So curveballs came all the time, but because of this foundational cultural quality of trust and learning, it kind of felt like you could weather any storm. I think back to like the moment where we had scaled the product globally. We made the software globally available in all currencies and all languages. It was a big moment where we went from like a very Western-centric product and customer base to one where totally new use cases, new users, new ways of thinking about the potential of point of sale software came into play. And that was a really hard challenge. It was one where it was like technically difficult, creatively challenging, where we had to think about how this thing translates in a different level of maturity. Like, how is someone maybe who owns a bakery in the Philippines going to need different tools than someone who owns like 5 bakeries in San Francisco? And like really thinking through how to mature the product, getting it to market really quickly, working war room style. These were all things that were factors in how we did this work. And it was hard. There were challenges where we couldn't get certain currencies to work. I remember the Icelandic kroner was like a problem for us. And so we had to quickly pivot and think about like, well, do we remove them from the marketing? Like, how do we do this? We're on this crazy timeline. Eventually, everything came together in the moment, in the right way, at the right quality where we could launch. But working so dynamically with an amazing product leader, with a dedicated engineering team, with an openness to pivoting the creative strategy as this thing, it's the last mile of delivery where everything's like going together. I think about that experience as one that, to me, and my takeaway is like literally anything is possible. Like truly, if you have the right people and the right ambition and the right willingness to like own your work and be open with your mistakes or fumbles, like I think it like upskilled all of us and like made us tougher and like more resilient in that work. But that's just one example. The company was a very ambitious company that was going after new hardware, new experimental payment methods. Like I think it was like 2013, you could pay with your face, which is kind of a crazy idea. We added Bitcoin to our online marketplace as a commerce option or payment option in like 2014. So these are all things that were like risky, complex, technically challenging, competitive, and like sometimes highly experimental. And so anyway, there were always curveballs, but but because of the like appetite for learning collectively was a baseline. I think we all got our like we all got our MBAs at Square during those years.
So you've had design operation roles at companies of like different sizes and at different stages in their life cycle. How does your approach to design operations change depending on like some of those factors in the company that you're at?
It's easy to say this in hindsight. I don't know that I had like this perspective as clearly in these roles, but my roles have looked very different. At Square, it was about like building the product and getting it in the hands of customers and scaling the company. My job at Facebook was totally focused on design education and like increasing the capacity and capability of a very large design organization. My job at Dropbox had a full range of problems to solve, but one of them was to restack a design team that had lost a lot of really great talent at the time of their IPO, and to build the brand and to attract talent that was like rare and specialized, and to rebuild a culture as you're building a team. And my job at Twitter was hardcore, super hardcore. It was leading strategy and operations for the chief design officer, Dantley Davis. And that was an incredible opportunity to really think about a challenge of protecting free speech while building software. Like that is a tall order and a really interesting and complex problem for a design team to solve. And then, now at Google, I lead design operations for the AI portfolio and search. And I am learning more than I ever have in my career in this moment, but I am focused back on making software and execution and design excellence. So if I zoom out and I look at the big themes, because these are very different jobs with very different levels of impact in a business, you have to think about like the scope and complexity and its impact over time. The building blocks of that look different at different stages of company maturity and also design operations maturity as both a practitioner and a function in a business. And so I think about like the pillars of work in kind of 4 buckets. One is always going to be product delivery. There is no operations if you do not have software to support. And that I think has got to be like the crown jewel in your design operations practice. Whether you're a producer working on the brand, that still is important to product delivery, or if you're deep in design and like AI model development, like domain expertise and program product management and producing is like essential. Then there's this bucket around organization, team health, coherence, culture. And that work has a full range of program types and opportunity spaces. Whether it's doing chief of staff work where you're focused on executive effectiveness, or you are looking at org building, and God bless everybody, but reorgs are kind of like unavoidable in our field. Or you're looking at talent programs like learning and development or cultivating your leadership bench. There's a whole world of work in that pillar. Then you have like your hardcore business operations, and that involves budgets and contracts and legal and compliance and the unavoidables of running a design team in a large business. And then there's this like last bucket that I think is sort of like special projects, partnerships, like really that connective tissue kind of work that happens in an org. So you might have a team where your design ops people do all of it. You might have one design ops person who does all of it. Or you might have like a more mature design ops practice where you have your people who are your drivers, the people who are upholding the design quality bar and delivering that product excellence. And then you might have biz ops specialists who centralize and do all of the contracts and do all of the like business process that power that software making arm. Or maybe there's a blend and people do have strengths and skills in different categories. I have held roles in kind of all of the different pillars. And as I've grown in my career, I've like at this point really doubled down on delivery and like building new products at the highest level of quality as quickly as possible. And I'm kind of going back to like my foundations that I got from my experience at Square, where there's urgency, there is innovation, there's a unity when you can pull like your talent together and really do something ambitious together. And that feels really good to go back to the basics in a really new emerging product space.
You mentioned craft a few times, and I mean, in design, we talk a lot about quality of craft. What does like craft look like for design operations?
I love this question. First of all, you must not fear a spreadsheet. It is one of the like foundational artifacts that people will look to you for, regardless of your role type. I say this as a joke, but I really mean it, that when you work in design and you're in operations, you must demonstrate your design acumen as clearly as you can demonstrate your business acumen. And so the operational craft includes like operational excellence, communication agility, your ability to manage stakeholders, your ability to foster team culture in the making process. There's a set of skills that are specialized and unique to operations, and it's in service of landing good design. And good design is design that solves the user need. It is nice to use, it feels good, it looks good, and it solves the business problem. And so craft cannot exist without the intersection of design excellence, customer centricity, and business acumen. And navigating that and setting the conditions to do good work is the job of design operations. So that's what I think the special sauce is in our craft.
When you're working with a team, where do you usually see the biggest gap that you feel like needs to be closed to reach that bar?
A good question. In my mind, it's the clarity around the challenge, the practice, and the maturity of a team or organization. When you have emerging products that are new and experimental, you have to create conditions that are scrappy. You need fast feedback. You may start with rough design and then refine once you really figure out your overall strategy, but you have to be able to do it really quickly. So you need a different type of design bench, often hybrid designers who can do things like UX and visual and prototyping. Probably need a little bit more foresight and a slightly more mature but still agile team and design practice. So that might look like having a bigger set of contributors. Potentially you have more specialized researchers, or maybe at this point you bring in UX writing. You have more formal reviews. You get that DC out and tell everybody what role they get to play in the project. And so you kind of go into like the best practices phase, but one that still fosters velocity. And then when you're like doing work that is the core business, the bread and butter, the thing that keeps the lights on and the paychecks coming in, totally different dynamic. You might have a longer timeline. You might have better staffing. It may be a more predictable run of business. And you kind of have to use more mature design practices in that stage. And so I think for DesignOps practitioners, really knowing the conditions that you have to set in the context of what you're trying to achieve will help you navigate that. It is not always clear. I work at Google. Google is an established organization with 25 years of excellence in the software space. But I'm working on new, exciting, emerging things. And that means that in a place where there are ways to do things, we have to like challenge the status quo and like rewrite the playbook for that really high velocity innovation. And that's our opportunity in DesignOps. You get to do that and like develop strategies that really unlock that design value in the practice. So it's an exciting time, and helping the team get on the same page and the same headspace and like getting to clarity around that really gets everything out of the way so the design work can happen and the product can land.
It's such a good example with Google where you can actually have different modes or circumstances all within the same company, something that looks early stage versus something that looks mature. I think also, when you're at a startup that's going through hyper growth, you can actually, in just a few years of being there, you can actually like transition through, a few different modes as the company grows. And then you end up in this situation where potentially the design team, like what's right for that moment or like what that circumstances is maybe not how they're used to working or what they expected, because kind of got put into a situation and didn't realize it was different. What are some tools or maybe interventions that you found that are like really effective at sort of like unsticking a team or like getting the team to make that change to like a new mode of working?
It's a good question. One thing that has really helped me work quickly on this problem with many, many people, both designers and cross-functionals, has been actually like writing it down and designing beautiful operations documents. First of all, designers are not going to read your 10-page white paper, but they will look at a couple slides if you illustrate your point in a nice, clear way. So creating artifacts that allow people to get that baseline information without you having to verbally tell them is like, it's how you scale something like this. Then there's the like building while you're flying the plane aspect of things, where you have to be flexible in your approach. No process is good for what you need if the conditions are changing. So you have to be flexible and adaptable, and that requires input and consultation and really thinking about your cross-functional partners and designers as part of your design operations strategy. So simple practices like postmortems or retrospectives, they do a lot for you. They allow you to like analyze what works and what doesn't work, for you to like reflect on potential roadblocks or things that are easy to change, and also identify like the bigger risk, things that take longer to shift that you might need executive support around or may need some tough conversations to solve. But really thinking about like your design leaders and your design ICs and your product managers and your engineers as all part of that strategy allow you to really see the full picture and identify where you can be flexible or adaptable in those tough moments.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. You said that your role at Dropbox, one of the things that you had to work with was helping to rebuild a design team because, they IPO'd and then a lot of that team left after that. What was your strategy going into that? Like how from your perspective and from an operations role, like how do you think about rebuilding a team like that?
I loved that job so much. And we got to work together in that time. So you can vouch for how fun it was to do that in that company. The way that I thought about it was that before you can figure out how to attract people to your team, you have to affirm all of the people who stayed on the team, that they're in the right place and that they're building something meaningful. And it is a place where they can grow and develop. And so starting with internal cultural programming, speaker series, team dinners, we made zines. There was a really special team there called Black Ops who did a lot of like internal cultural campaigning. So partnering with them to figure out what story we wanted to tell and also make true for the culture internally was kind of step one. Once that was kind of a flywheel and going and people were just so excited about these new ways to engage with the team, I partnered really closely with recruiting to think about where are we going as a business? And then what is the composition of the team necessary to get there and to really compete in that space? And so we came up with really creative strategies to start to like build the pipeline and get people excited about Dropbox without being ready with the open roles or having to engage in an interview right away. So think about this as like building the funnel of people who would eventually go into that talent pipeline. So we did kind of cool, big things that got people's attention, that built the Dropbox design brand. And some of those things included, we hosted dinner parties once a week where we would invite like 20 researchers, 20 quant researchers. We wanted it to be like rare and specialized, where just showing up would be valuable to a participant, but also you would walk away with something really cool, ideas, new relationships, something. So these dinner parties, we did them every week, and I was on LinkedIn stalking every person in the industry to see like, do I want to do a writing dinner? Maybe we do a book swap. What should we do? And like really thinking about how to bring people together around the craft and the community. That was incredibly fun. And I really look back at Dropbox because it was so supportive of community. One of the truths about working at Dropbox is it's an incredibly generous company. And I found that like that gave me a lot of runway to do very interesting things with this programming. And then once we had that moving and we had a good pipeline and we had these relationships, we did two things. We built out Dropbox.design, which was a really cool design site with toolkits, publications, interviews, things that like kind of shined a light on the community at large and gave our internal folks like an opportunity to stretch. We help people write their first blog posts, Some people who had never done it before got to do visual art direction. We really opened a lot of like making space for the team. And then that was something that opened the funnel even wider. More people in the world knew about Dropbox because they could see, well, and it gave us a space to really kind of like experiment with our voice. One of the greatest campaigns that we ran was called Feminist Propaganda. And it was a magazine that we made, and it was run by Ladies Who Create, which was our internal women and non-binary group within the company. And we made a zine about the role and intersectionality of feminism and design and who we drew inspiration from in the industry. That campaign brought a little team website over 1 million views. And we sent out, wow, I think I want to say 5,000 copies of that magazine. And it was cheap and it was scrappy and it was awesome. And it as a woman in design, I was so proud to work on that team and to be able to put something out that was pretty edgy, to say this company's putting out propaganda, that kind of feels counterintuitive, but it also showed the world how dynamic Dropbox design was and how cool it was to be part of the team that can put something like that out there. And so with all of that work, all of the puzzle pieces came together where we built an incredible team. We had to restack by 40%, and we had some of the best design leaders on our bench, and we had really good business challenges to go after. And we had repositioned Dropbox as a place people loved working and a place where people wanted to work. And in that were growth strategies. There was creative aspiration. There was this flywheel of building it internally and showing it externally and inviting people into that experience. And we did some cool things that still are projects I'm very proud of and still talk about with the teams I've joined since as a way to think about real creative potential and creating space for it on design teams.
When you're doing that much experimentation, you're trying new things, inevitably not everything works out or maybe is not as the idea was in your head. What was a mistake you feel like you made during that time?
Honestly, it was not asking for help sooner. As an individual, I really pushed myself to deliver every single thing myself. But I was amongst these incredibly talented, invested people. And I think I could have given up the reins a little bit so that other people could shape it as much as I was shaping it or driving it. And I wish I asked for help sooner. Once I got someone on my team who could help me with this work, we started to think about it a little bit differently and allowed other people to lead, which then made the program even richer and more dynamic with how it happened and how it grew. And it meant that there were fewer single points of failure. Once I sort of got out of the way of who got to do the work, so many more people got to lead, new ideas came in. And then when I finally left the company for new opportunities, it lived on and cool things are still happening. And it is still a wonderful, very craft-centered place to work. And it was a growth moment for me, but it also just set that team up to carry it forward and pass the torch. And it was a big learning, and it was hard to admit that I couldn't do it all, but at the same time, accepting that really opened the door to good things.
Nice. After you left Dropbox, you were at Twitter, and you mentioned earlier how intense of a role that was, and just the tall order of, trying to encourage and foster free speech. And you were there during a pretty big moment in Twitter's history, or at least leading up to it with Elon Musk buying Twitter. What was it like around that time at Twitter? And what was that like for you leading up to those moments? Because for months, if not longer, that was the thing that was on everyone's mind. This was not a quick overnight process.
I'm so grateful that I got to work there during that time because it stretched me in ways that I never thought I would have the opportunity to stretch. And I was part of a team that really believed it was doing something meaningful. And it was critical work in the product space. I had the opportunity to lead strategy and operations for Dantley Davis, who is truly an incredible design leader. He's a business leader and a craftsperson. And those two things kind of make you unstoppable in these really complex product spaces. What I am so grateful for is that he would put me in situations that I did not have experience in, that I didn't have like domain expertise, but he gave me enough of a setup that I could problem solve and really like have an impact in the right ways in the right moments. And part of that was having a peer group of other chiefs of staff and heads of operations in legal, in engineering, in these other functions where I also had this incredible group that I could call upon for support, whose playbooks I could draw from, who would partner with me on some of the like hardest challenges. And I will tell you that Twitter was chaotic, but it was chaotic good. And it was a team of people who were the most diverse group of people I've ever worked with, which meant we had a world of knowledge and perspectives that was unique to that group. The company was there to protect free speech, which means that speaking freely was a core to freely. You also have to be able to listen and translate many thoughts and opinions into meaning and into a strategy. And that was a big growth moment for me as it came to like internal communications and organizational strategies. And there was an existential threat of the company being sold. I joined Twitter to work with Dantley and to work with Jack Dorsey. I had worked very closely with him in my time at Square, and I really believe that he is a values-driven leader. And him leaving was a real shift. And we had to reorganize the company when he left, which meant that I was no longer leading this centralized strategy and operations function and had to take a role on the 0 to 1 team, which was a team focused on incubating new ideas and solving cross-company problems. And there was a timeline. Either the deal was going to go through or it wasn't, and we would know by late summer, and we knew we might all get fired. And so really like staying focused and doing good work with an existential threat like that really is a challenge. But the work that happened in those months were so incredible. The team shipped the edit button. That was an incredibly difficult infrastructure challenge. We started to incubate like new ideas, new capabilities that pushed Twitter into like more competitive space. New features like voice tweets and other things were like coming to market, and we were learning like faster than ever. So while I had to pivot and shift quite a bit in this business, I still look at it with like a lot of gratitude for like stretching me in the directions that I had blind spots or lack of experience in. And I walked away a lot stronger and more knowledgeable about what to do and kind of like, you know, the phrase like wartime company, like you're either in like abundance or you're like in war mode. That was certainly the case there, and it made me a better leader. And, you know, so there's a timeline, right? Like you're waiting for the deal to close. It closed in October. The writing was on the wall that it would happen, and I didn't feel personally aligned to Elon. He's not someone who I wanted to work for or be in charge of his strategy and operations. And so I had always wanted to work at Google. Not having a degree always made me a little insecure about even applying to Google. But I had the opportunity to join as an IC, as a program manager. And I jumped at the chance. I have always wanted to work at Google, and that was offered to me in the right moment where I could make a change really swiftly and join a new team.
What was it about Google that, like, why the appeal for you?
I feel like I've always had like a short list of things that I want to do in life. Some of them are silly, simple things like, what is it called? Skydiving. Or I want to learn how to ride a motorcycle. And those are kind of on the easy, achievable list. But Google felt like something that was aspirational. I have always really, really valued working with engineering partners, and for it to have such a world-class engineering organization was very attractive to me. And I know I keep coming back to the idea of learning, but Google felt like a place I could really learn from and see like world-class organization. And so that was what attracted me. And all of those things are true. I have some of the best engineering partners. I have incredible product partners. I'm part of a big operations function where there are people from maps to commerce to Android, all of these different areas where I learn from these people and I can call upon them for their playbooks, their strategies. So it has fulfilled its promise of being a place where I could like really push my craft forward.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, some of the apprehension you felt about applying to Google in the past because you didn't have a degree. I mean, we obviously know for Google that worked out okay. What has it been like throughout other parts of your career? Like, have you ever felt like that was an obstacle, not finishing your degree?
In reality, it has never come up. No one has asked me about my degree or lack thereof. But I don't have a degree, but I grew up very poor. I grew up in really rough conditions, one of the toughest neighborhoods in San Diego, and playing ball with like some of the best people in the world. I was insecure. I have been insecure throughout my career, and having those sort of like perceived disadvantages like was something that I always had to navigate internally. And I think for people who maybe have my background, who don't have degrees either, the way you overcome it is by building confidence in what you can do. No, I don't have a degree, but I can run a program like you've never seen, and I can lead a team that does incredible things. And building belief in yourself and confidence in yourself to offset whatever insecurity is because you started at a different place in life, it takes time. It does not come without earning it, but that's how I've been able to overcome that insecurity. Also, sharing that with others, sharing my upbringing and story with people, help them kind of humanize their own experiences. And maybe they didn't have that exact foundation, but maybe there were other aspects that they too are insecure about. And it kind of just lowers the volume on insecurity the second you can connect with others about who they are and where they come from.
For someone who's maybe weighing the option of getting their degree in the field or going straight into the workforce, what advice do you have for them? Because getting a degree is not the only way to learn or build experience, but it can be expensive financially in terms of time. It's,
Totally.
4+ years of your potential working career. Like, do you either think that it's advantageous maybe for some people, or like in what circumstances might it make sense or not make sense for someone who is looking to enter this field?
Something to think about is how you like to learn. I'm someone who likes to learn by doing. And so my knowledge comes from these job opportunities that I have gotten throughout my career. Some people are academic, structured, linear thinkers who do really well in the classroom environment. Others really find their stride when they get into community spaces where they can learn through discussion and through observation. Really taking a close look at where you are energized by how you're learning can give you a really good signal, especially for creative people, on where to go and where to seek that. I think a degree is a good idea for a transition. When you're 18, you're leaving high school and you're becoming an adult out in the world. And even though I didn't finish school, I really value my time that I was in school so that I could pivot from being a teenager to an adult. That might look like community colleges for some people or a boot camp, but creating space for you to grow and to get through those transitions is part of the equation as well. Other things that come into play in these transitions is your mental health. Change is so hard. You might face depression, you might face anxiety, you might be pushing the boundaries of your ability to socialize during this time. And so thinking about all of those factors as like important inputs to deciding how you navigate will help you know where to go, how to do it in the way that's going to serve you. The other thing that I'll say is you do not have to do it right away. You can take a gap year. You can work a little bit and then go to school. I think a lot of people, especially the sort of American dream archetype, is go to school, go to more school, get a job, get married, have your kids, retire. Like that's kind of like an archetype. Life is so dynamic and it is so long that if you want to pivot or you want to take your time or you're not ready to make that commitment yet because of the financial aspect or whatever, those are valid experiences and you will learn other things if that is not the path you go or if you delay a little bit. It's been something I've had to really kind of discuss with myself internally and navigate that, like, no, I don't have a degree right now, but I I could take a sabbatical and go finish it and give that back to myself. Or I could teach. Teaching is like one actually really cool way to learn because it forces you to distill your ideas into material that other people can learn from. So anyway, that is all to say that you learn throughout your life, and knowing how you like to learn can give you a really good signal on what to do about it.
You mentioned earlier having to think about your own mental health, and I feel like going through the pandemic and even right now with like so many companies doing layoffs, being more aware of your own mental health and like the effect that these things can have on you is becoming increasingly important to do creative work. How do you find balance? Like what have you learned over the years to help yourself sort of stay in check and healthy and kind of in the right headspace that you need to be?
Yeah, good question. It's going to look different at different phases of your life and career. There have been times where I've really kind of like muscled through the tough moments, and that has worked in some contexts. There are other times where I've had to really kind of build my own board of directors who have helped me navigate change. There was a period in my life where I had a career coach, a therapist, a psychiatrist, a trusted group of friends so I could really talk about career and finance and these big questions about. And that was like a deep bench of support system. Then there have been other times where just letting the people around me know where I'm at has actually served me the greatest. I am in a period of time right now, just based on my portfolio, that I'm genuinely stressed. But it's a good stress because it's meaningful. But it means that I don't have the same social battery that I would in a period where I don't have as much on my plate. And letting my friends and loved ones know that I'm on something cool, but it's stressful, so I can't really hang out that much. Navigating that has like allowed for a lighter touch level of support and understanding from the people around me without having to go so hardcore on like personal development and coaching and all these other things. And so your mental health will always be part of your creative toolkit, and nurturing it and protecting it and trying different things, whether it's like therapy or medicine or relationship health, it can really be something that like powers your creative thinking when you're in a good place.
So you're in a part of your career right now where, because of that demand and sort of the healthy stress, like you said, that you're taking on, you end up, at least in some ways, distancing yourself from other social parts of your life. How do you keep that in check? Like, how do you make sure when you're like in it that doesn't either go on too long or push too far? How do you not become the frog in the boiling pot of water?
I'm working on it, if I'm being honest. And there are things that help me, like on a personal level, do that. I think it was Angel Steger who said this once, but you have your like dirty house friends, your friends who are allowed to come over when your bed isn't made and your like trash isn't taken out. Those are the people I really lean on when I'm going through a tough phase, because those are the people I want to do self-care with. I want to go to the spa with those people. I want to go on a walk with those people. There's other friends who are very important to me who are just not as close. And so the frequency in which I can give myself to those relationships is a little different. And just staying mindful of that, missing people, texting them when you think of them, that can be as nurturing to a relationship as going out for drinks or having a barbecue with somebody. So nurturing relationships in a way that like helps me has been something that's really working, especially lately. And then if you work for a company, whether it's unlimited PTO or not, you have to take a break at least once a quarter. You have to take at least 4 weeks off a year. As a human, your body and mind are not at their best if you're not doing that. And so a long weekend, a vacation, getting away from the work, closing your laptop at 5 p.m., building these habits will protect your well-being and ensure that like you have that recovery time. There's also that thought line of thinking that looking forward to a trip is as valuable as going on a trip to some people. And so having something like on the calendar that you're looking forward to can be a really powerful way to like sustain especially your creative energy in a stressful period of time.
Do you have something on your calendar right now?
I do. I decided to go to Portland in 2 weeks and hang out with some friends at XOXO. And then later this year, I have a really cool opportunity to go to Brazil. I'm building a team out there, which is never done it before. So excited about it. So I really look forward to that Brazil trip.
Wow. That sounds like another incredible learning opportunity.
Completely, like cross-cultural team building. That's like, I haven't had to do that as much lately. And I know that I will get something out of it. I will grow from doing that work.
Perhaps in some ways, this is related to you building a team in Brazil, but I do want to come back to something that you talked about earlier while you were at Dropbox in the magazine that you published. I know like supporting and amplifying marginalized voices in the design community is something that's like an important part of your work. What are some other ways that you've been able to do that?
I have had a number of side projects that have created space for that in my life. And for anyone who's creative, doing creative work with your friends can be like really fulfilling and energizing. So some examples of this would be back in 2018, I partnered with my friend Gabe Valdivia, and we created a conference called Vectors. And the conference was about the intersection of identity and design. And so it was very human-centered, and we invited some really cool people from across the industry to come and speak about who they are as people and how that's shaped their design practices. And it was super inspiring and interesting and exactly right for the moment that we did it. Other things that I've done as side projects include Designers and Geeks. This is a big speaker series that I ran every month with my partner, Joe Robinson. And we every month would pick a topic and invite an interesting speaker. Didn't have to be a designer, but the topic had to be creative. And those events brought so many cool and interesting people into my life. We did a series called High by Design, which was about the role of design in the cannabis industry right as it was becoming legal in California. Very cool conversations about how to transform what was like hippie Rastafarian culture into like heritage brands and like using design to shift like brand appeal in a sort of taboo space. These kind of talks would really kind of ignite thinking around new problems to bring design to. We talked about design in agriculture, design in sex and culture, and new technologies like VR and AR. And for me, it was a way to like look out into the world and find people who may have not shared their story yet or who may have not put their work in front of such a large audience. And I made sure, and Joe was insistent on this as well, that we had all identities represented in our lineup. And it led to some cool things. It led to some really cool opportunities, new relationships. People would come to those events who are job seekers and connect with someone. I have a friend who she shifted from digital design to product design for the cannabis industry through that series I just mentioned. And it's so aligned to her interests and what she wants to do in life. And she's really thrived in that career sense. So creating space for the voice is something, especially as an operator, as someone who like sets the conditions of work, who brings people together. If you can create a space for people and put them in it, good things will happen.
Sometimes these events, they're sort of one-off either because of the topic or for whatever reason, but sometimes they kind of like go beyond what you originally intended. Have any of these turned into and grown into like a community that still continues, or any that surprised you in that way?
On a personal level, my community has become so rich because of these kind of events, and also getting to collaborate with people in different ways. Putting someone on stage who has never given a talk before is like, that is a journey. And that's one where you really kind of get close when you're going through that. So personally, I've gained so much knowledge and relationships through this kind of stuff. Designers and Geeks didn't live on during the pandemic. It didn't pivot to digital events. And the magic was really in showing up to these things. But I think that those folks exist in other realms, like on Twitter in Slack communities where that happens. And I think like finding those places where you feel like you can nurture your interests and your relationships, they're really worth engaging in. The biggest community that I'm a part of today is called the Design Operations Assembly. And it's a program and a community where people like me who are in this kind of niche space of design operations come together, and we share perspectives and resources. And I teach through this program, and I can ask big questions like, hey, has anyone ever run a compensation strategy before? Or has anyone doing anything cool for helping teams learn about AI? Like, I can call upon this like really rich network of people, and you kind of like get out of it what you put into it. So I think there is incredible value in community, and figuring out like where to go to be nurtured and contribute is really kind of what you got to look for.
Nice. This has been amazing. I appreciate your story so much. To wrap up, DesignOps is sort of has been an emerging discipline. And I mean, really over the course of your career, you've sort of lived through a lot of that emergence into our field. And I think a lot of people who are early in their career, maybe they're going through school, maybe don't even know that that's a potential career path or what that involves. What advice would you have for someone who's sort of at the beginning of their journey, that like how could they best prepare themselves for a career in design ops?
Because there's no degree in design operations, you kind of have to have this inner knowing that this work will be satisfying to you. And so some of the characteristics that I think have to be true for someone who wants to come into this field are that you have to be supportive. You have to be interested in helping others achieve big things. You have to be organized. So if you are an A-type person, if you have any Virgo in your astrological chart, this is a really cool job for you. But then you also have to be curious, because so much of this work involves the invisible connective tissue between the doers and the ideas. And so if those things are sort of natural to you, like you can do anything in this field. And you don't have to come from a design background. I have partners who are some of my favorite people to pair with, who came through the administrative business partner route. People who came from customer service, people with totally different backgrounds, but have interest in design and have that sort of like systems thinking foundation that is really important to design ops. So if you're in design and you're interested in like how design happens, this could be the field for you. And there's a lot of people out there who can support you in navigating that. That's the best part of the community aspect of things. None of us got degrees in design operations. And because of that, there's a big willingness to share and support and cultivate early career people in this space.
Thank you again, Michelle, for joining the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you online or maybe follow some of your work?
I'm not a very online person, but I do love to write about the practice. And so you can find me on Substack at pgms.substack.com. And I would love to hear about others' ideas and experience with design operations. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Amazing. Thanks again, Michelle.
Thank you, Chris.
And that's a wrap for our conversation with Michelle Morrison. From taking unexpected advice that shaped her career to leading design ops at some of the biggest names in tech, Michelle's journey is proof that there's no one right path to success. Her insights on building teams, navigating high-stakes roles, and learning along the way were truly inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Pixelated Path so you don't miss out on our next conversation with more fascinating design leaders and trailblazers. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Abad, and we'll see you next time on Pixelated Path.